Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and basically what this is going to be a new sort of React Express build where I'm going to be implementing authentication. Well, one reason is just because it's been a while since I've done this kind of build, and a lot of libraries have changed. So some of the things I would do to build this have changed, or the way I would build this has changed. So we're going to try that out. So first story is this. First, we're going to do our setup. So this first video is going to be setup. And what I'm going to want to do is we are going to first create a folder for our backend. I'm not going to deploy this, so I'm not going to go over deployment in this video. I have plenty of videos on deploying Express apps and deploying React apps. I'll defer you to those. So everything's going to be run locally here. But we're going to have our backend. And then for the front end, we're going to use React. So instead of creating a folder, I'm just going to use create React app. So npx create React app at latest, make sure we're using the latest version, and we're just going to call the folder front end. Okay, we'll come back to that at a later point. So, yep, there it goes. Okay, good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new terminal. So I'm going to right click on the backend folder, open up a new terminal here in the backend folder, and we'll start setting this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch a server.js file, a .getignore file, a .env file, and we're going to be using Mongo. I'm going to use Mongo locally, so I'm going to start up my Mongo server. So sudo mongod. Okay, cool. My Mongo server is on, so that's running. Okay. That way I don't have to worry about like passwords and users. Although I think last time I did this, I ran into some trouble, but we'll figure that out. Okay, so we touched those files. Let me just open that up over here. Okay. So for the env, I want to put my database URL. So database URL is going to equal MongoDB slash, and then I think the issue was I need to put the actual IP address. So 127.0.0.1 on port 27017, and the database will just be called, we'll just call this React Express 013023. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's good there. And then I'll have a port. Might as well have a port variable there. So port we'll have for the Express app, we'll use 4000. And a secret, we're probably going to need a secret at some point. So let's set that up, and we'll just call it cheese. That could be anything. Okay, so generally this is going to be used for like generally your generally for like encoding either your session cookies or for your JOT tokens, JWT. So that's what that's for. Port, just what port is our app going to run on, our backend app specifically, and then database URL, just the URL to my MongoDB database for the backend to save data in. Now getignore, I'm going to want to make sure that I ignored the node modules folder because we never want to upload the node modules folder to GitHub. And I want to make sure I ignore the .env file so that doesn't get pushed up to GitHub. Not that I have any sensitive information in this go around. Okay, so cool. Now I need to initiate my node project. So npm init -y. Okay, so there we have our backend package.json, and then we can install all the libraries we'll need for our backend. So npm install. I'm going to need Express. I'm going to want Morgan because the Morgan logs definitely are always very helpful. I'm going to need CORS because we need to make sure we enable CORS permission so that way our front end can talk to our back end. We're going to need JSON Web Token because we're going to be using JSON Web Tokens for authorization purposes. I'm going to need bcrypt.js because we need to encode user passwords and stuff. Anything else I want? Oh, I'm going to need Mongoose so we can interact with our database. And if there's anything else, I think we'll just add it as we go along. So I'll install that. So that's going to go get installed. While that's done, I'm going to add some scripts to my package.json. Okay. So we're going to have start, which should always be npm, oh no, I mean node server.js. Then I'm going to have dev, which is going to be, no, I could do it as nodamon server.js. The cool thing now is that in the newest versions of Node, I could actually do this. I could do like node dash, I think it's like dash dash watch server.js. Let me just double check. Okay, so node watch node 18. Yeah, so it's like node. Yeah, so you just do node dash dash watch, and then that's gonna actually basically is the same thing as nodamon, but now built in to Node if you're using Node 18 or higher. Okay, and then right now I am currently using Node 19.3, so I will have that feature available. So just so you guys, so for those of you who have newer versions of Node, so you're aware of that. If not, you can still use nodamon. And then I'm going to create a seed script. I always like setting that up so we can see our database later. This file doesn't exist yet, but it will. And that'll just be node db/seed.js. Okay, cool. So those are going to be my scripts, so that way I can just run those commands pretty easily. Next, let's create some folders. So I'm going to make some folders. I'm going to want a folder for controllers. I'm going to want a folder for models. I'm going to have a DB folder this time around because I'm going to separate some of the database stuff into its own folder instead of putting it in models. Sometimes I'll do one, sometimes I'll do the other. You know, it doesn't really, again, at the end of the day, like the folder structure is just for your own personal organization, as long as you know where your stuff is. Controllers, models, database, and I think that's all I'm going to really need. I'll just create like a utils folder just in case for any, if I need to write any sort of utility functions. Okay, so there we go. I got all my folders. And let's just kind of get this going. Let's just build out server.js, make sure it's working, and then we'll wrap up this first video. Okay, and actually, you know what? I want to use ES module syntax, so that way I can just use ES module syntax for this whole go around. So if you want to use module syntax, not meaning, you know, import statements, export statements versus common JS, which is like require, using like module that exports. If you want to switch that up, in your package.json, all you have to do is put a key called type, and then you set that to module. Okay, and then now I can use ES module syntax in all my files. Okay, so we can do that. So I'm going to head over to server.js, and I can be like import express from express. I can be like import Morgan from Morgan. Import cores from cores. Import, oh, I forgot to install .env. That would be important. No npm install .env. Okay, npm .env from .env. Import. That's good for there. Okay, so of course what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make sure I set up all my environmental variables. So that'd be .env.config, that config function. So we'll run that first. So again, read .env file. Then I want to create our express object. Okay, so const app equals express. And then we're going to register middleware. So we'll say, like, first I'll have cores. Again, cores is going to give permission to the front end to be able to make API calls. I'm not going to get too deep into the core story. I do have some videos on cores cross-origin resource sharing if you want to learn more about how that works. And I also have some blog articles on it. But this is just going to allow external requests, essentially. App.useMorgan. And we'll just use dev. And again, this is just going to be for logging. App.use. App.use. Anything else I want to use here? Oh, I'm going to want express.json because we're going to be using JSON bodies in our requests. So express.json. So this way we parse JSON bodies. I think that's good for now. Then here we'll have a section for routes and routers. And here we're just going to have our test route just to see if it's working. So we'll just say test route app.get /test res.send server is working. And then we're going to set up our listener. Okay. AKA turn on the server. So first I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab that port variable. So port equals process.env.port, because that's where all our environmental variables end up. That's port. And if for some reason it's not defined, we'll just default to 4444. Okay, and then we'll do app.listen. And we're going to listen to on the port that's defined in the port variable. And then we'll have a function that runs just as the server turns on. And what that function will do is console.log listening on port, and then we'll interpolate the port variable. Okay, and let's run that. npm run dev. Okay, so we can see it's watching. So we can see like, hey, there's the output that it's using watch mode, and then we can see it's listening on port 4000. So if I try this, we go to localhost 4000/test, because that was the test route we made, and server is working. Good. So we're all set up. So that's video number 1. I'll keep seeing you as we go through the build. See you all soon.